And welcome to Logic and Reason, Episode 2. Tonight's episode, we are discussing Math is Not Reality. Our special guests are AT2 Productions and Mike Bertelson. Tonight, we would like to take a moment to dedicate this stream to the memory of a true gentleman and pillar of our community, Cy Strike. He will be missed. Thank you for all that you've done for all of us, Cy. With that, I am Logical Troglodyte. I will be your co-host this evening. And for anybody new to this channel is not a point and laugh at conspiracy theorists, flirts, or other silliness. This is a purely intellectual conversation about specific conspiracy theories claims where we bring together real educated experts in their field to discuss those claims and decide whether or not they have any validity. With that, I would like to introduce my co-host, Steaming Cup of Reason.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to the show. I'm Jeff from Steaming Cup of Reason and we're really excited about the show tonight. As Logical said, we're going to be discussing the claim that math is not reality. And with us today, I'd like to introduce our first guest, a real master of the maths, Mr. Mike Bertelson. Mike, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Bertelson. I have a little YouTube channel with a couple of videos. The most watched one, of course, is one from Walt Disney World. But I have a couple of flat Earth videos.
A man of a few words. Well, Mike is Mike is a true gentleman in our community, highly educated in the field of engineering, and we're glad to have him on the show. Our returning guest this week is AT2 Productions. Jared, please introduce yourself and tell the audience who may not know you, who you are and what you do on YouTube. Jared? Hello?
Gotta love the mute button sometimes. To be fair, it has been a long day, and I have quite the drive ahead of me with a particular passenger that better behave or he will find himself on the roof. For those who don't know, I am Jared of AT2 Productions, former U.S. Navy avionics tech who decided to go even further and go straight into electrical engineering, as well as a minor and associates in aeronautical engineering. So this topic, oh yes, it is my enjoyment because numbers are so much fun. I'll be honest, I like numbers better than I like people.
I don't blame you, because numbers at least aren't going to lie to us. And joining us once again as Chief Mod is Amy Hogan. Amy, say hi to everybody. Tell everybody who you are and what you do on YouTube.
Hello, everyone. I'm all excited to be here, and we're going to be starting a new channel soon. I'm really excited about that. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that everyone is here too.
And Amy will be watching everything going on in the live chat. And for all the moderators, those are you with the blue wrenches, a little housekeeping. Everyone is welcome on Logic and Reason in the Temple of Wisdom, even if they are conspiracy theorists. They can say whatever they want to say, provided they're being courteous, they're not being racist or sexually explicit. They are welcome to ask any questions they want, which may or may not be addressed during this live stream, provided they are on topic. So don't time them out unless they're just being jerks. And Jeff, we got 2 more introductions. I'll let you handle those.
Next, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our executive producer. Sorry, my tongue's not cooperating today. Mr. Dick Dawson. Dick?
Well, hello, everybody. Dick Dawson here. Thanks for having me on again, guys. It is an absolute pleasure to be a part of this fantastic show.
Well, we're good. We're sure glad to have you.
And Dick, I just heard Amy say something about a new channel. I think you're involved with that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I would actually love to. So, Amy Hogan and myself have started a new channel, and you'll see that I'm logged in as it in the chat right now. Always unique, totally interesting, sometimes mysterious, which is Autism, the acronym. And it will be a live show where we have guests on that live with autism. It could be they have autism, it could be autism in the family, parents with children. Amy and myself both have autistic children. Everybody, the kids and all, will be live on the show, and it will be an absolutely fantastic learning experience and a fun time for all. So, Amy, am I right? Everybody, come check out our new channel.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
And Amy and Dick, if you want to, from time to time, drop a link to that channel in the live chat, I would appreciate it. Everybody in the audience, if you would click on that link, tickle their subscribe and bell buttons, and watch that space. It's bound to be interesting.
It's going to be awesome. And finally, I'd like to introduce our producer, the man who makes the magic, Tattie-bogle. Tattie?
All right, troops, how's it going? I'll just be sitting here in the back, swearing silently at the computer and hitting it with a hammer. Enjoy the show, folks.
Awesome.
It's going to be a good one.
Thank you very much.
All right. And if anybody in the audience have any question for any of us on the panel, feel free to @ Amy Hogan, and she will make sure that we know about it so we can answer your questions. Once again, provided they're on topic. So if you want to know what color socks I'm wearing, not going to fly.
Damn, there goes my question.
So, as promised, tonight we are discussing the conspiracy theorist claim that math is not reality. While we were talking about this show with Mike and Jared and Jeff in the background, we didn't want to make this just a show about how mathematical equations work. So we got to talking about it and got to thinking a little more deeply. Now, when conspiracy theorist claims say this, it's very easy to say, well, they just don't understand it, therefore in their mind it's fake, or it's confirmation bias, but I think that's a little bit too easy at times. I think there is a misconception about math, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or a normal person, regardless, about what math is, what it's used for, what it's applicable. Why are there all these different kinds of math? I saw somebody not long ago talking to me about math who brought up the toothpaste ads on TV. The 4 out of 5 dentists agree. Well, yeah, that's an absolutely meaningless statement. There's too many questions, and that's a bit of an abuse to statistical math. So why don't we use that as a starting point and see where we go? Mike, Jared, what do you got to say?
Well, as far as math goes, and like you were saying about 4 out of 5 dentists, well, there's also, basic stuff like just balancing your checkbook, going along and figuring out how much to tip your server, how many boxes of tiles you need to buy to tile your floor. All of that is real world, everyday stuff that people encounter. Where to go? And to use any of the interesting part about what's been going on lately is using real world examples to say that you can't use math in everyday life for certain things, and it just doesn't make any sense as far as that goes.
Jared, you got any thoughts about it?
Well, no, it's just that you run into those instances like that dentist claim where you're looking at statistics which are easy to manipulate to say just about whatever you want them to, but when you're looking at mathematics as it pertains to reality, you almost have to ignore those types of bland and easily malleable statistical usages, where if you go into pure statistical analysis, and also really my experience and Mike's with the engineering side of it, where you're actually doing quantitative analysis, that's where math really does hit its stride, because it cuts through a lot of the BS that you can run into when designing a solution to a problem, where you can actually get predictive outcomes of what should be happening and then compare it to a test rig to see, okay, where did it go wrong? What did I end up forgetting? Or what is it that may have gone out of tolerance to change what from what was expected to what we actually have? And that's where it, not just in engineering, especially electrical engineering, but in science in general, the majority of the predictions that are made of what should happen from this experiment is at its foundation a mathematical exposition and explanation of, if this, you add this, here's your result. And that's where outright math is not reality. What we are seeing is not the summation of different formula and equations. However, math is very descriptive and predictive of reality once you know how to appropriately utilize the language that is mathematics.
And I made a statement on the Shills show tonight, and I am not educated as a mathematician. Yes, I've had college level algebra, but that's as far as I went. I didn't get into any of the higher maths. But correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but math is not just a tool for science, it's a language for science. So would you agree with that statement?
Oh, it absolutely is a language for science and physics and engineering as a whole. It is it is a tool to be able to describe and design and learn about our reality around us. Just because we can calculate and predict something that you can't physically see or hold doesn't make any of that any less real. It is all still real world. And I use math on a daily basis as an engineer. It is literally what I do for a living. And we design stuff in a virtual environment, so it's completely designed by math. Then I analyze it by math, and it's all described to the customer by math, and never have actually touched a physical object to be able to do it. That's part of the problem with saying, in the real world, you can't have a negative ice cream or something along those lines, because it really is a logical fallacy of a sort. I'm not sure exactly which one. I kind of think it might be a non sequitur, but it's like saying that all crows are black and all crows are birds, therefore all birds are black. It really doesn't follow.
So even if, say, you had a customer at the boatyard that wanted a yacht built, and they didn't speak English, yeah, you'd have to say they spoke Spanish. You'd have to have a bit of a Spanish translator. But if they understood the math as well as you understood the math, would you still really need that Spanish translator?
Probably not. But we can run through everything in a virtual environment if we needed to. Yeah, we could show them the equations. We could show them the criteria we met mathematically, and they would understand all of what we're talking about.
And Amy just alerted me that in the background that we have some comments in the comments section, and one of them, I think, would speak directly, in part, would speak directly to Jeff as an early childhood educator. Amy, what you got for us?
Yes, I have a whole bunch of comments here that are really good. I've got one from Fred Knotts who said, why can't they understand the difference between applied mathematics and theoretical mathematics? And
Great question.
that is a great question. And I also have one from Anti-Flatter that says, math is designed to confuse him. And Forever Learning said, I like this too. In my view, mathematics is a language resulting from the ultimate level of abstraction of reality. And then Demonic Davro said, when I was a welder, I had to use mathematics for all sorts of things. And if I may add here too, does anybody cook and bake? I use math to do that. And if you follow the instructions directly, you have evidence-based instructions there that you're going to end up with your cake or whatever you're making. So
Mhm.
it's everywhere.
I mean, those are the simple concepts that I try to get through to my grade 3 students. Math is everywhere, and if you don't learn math right, you're going to have problems figuring out even the simplest things. Math is more than just numbers as far as teaching children is concerned. It's teaching them how to think in a way that they can arrive at the proper results. It's training their brain to become analytical, which is what they're going to need as they move on to high school and college.
Yeah, and I was specifically thinking about Annie Flatter's comment about math is designed to confuse me. As an early childhood educator, Jeff, I'm sure you hear that a lot from the children that you teach. How do you address that complaint?
Um, which complaint exactly? Kind of lost track there.
That math is just designed to confuse me. I don't get it,
Okay,
and they just get frustrated with it.
sorry, I got a little distracted. Yeah, well, I do hear that a lot. Math just confuses me. And I keep trying to tell my children that if you let it confuse you, it will. It's simple. You know your numbers. Just think step by step. Don't take it all at once. And that's why they get confused.
Yeah, and I had a math instructor my freshman year in college who, when I was getting frustrated, just told me, he's like, the hardest math in the world is the one you're currently learning. Now, there's a lot of rules to math. And like I said, I've only done the basic mathematics, statistical maths, and algebra. The rest of them I have not studied. So what I want to know from our experts is, how do the rules differ between the different types of mathematics, and how are they applied differently in the professional world?
Well, they're I think they're applied. The rules aren't any different whether it's mechanical engineering or theoretical physics. The math rules are pretty much what they are. Um, how they're used, and in certain situations, certain aspects of like theoretical physics they can divide by zero in some cases, um, which by the way equals infinity, not nothing, by the way. But they all follow the same basic guidelines. The same rules apply for all the separate disciplines and all the applications, whether it's theoretical, whether it's practical. And you should be able to go from one to the other, even if you don't understand any of what the background theory is, and be able to figure out what they're doing by looking at the equations and how they get the results they're looking for.
So in algebra, I learned that one of the first things I have to do in an equation is take care of the expression within the parentheses first, and then start working out from there. So if I go into geometry or trigonometry or calculus, that same rule still applies, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And that's where a lot of people seem to get tripped up from what I've seen both during the undergrad and the work I'm doing now is some people do forget those foundational things that you do get from even just elementary, like your order of operations, and simple things like that will have catastrophic cascading issues as you're working through a problem, especially it what I really, at first I didn't understand, but as we got into it during my undergrad, I definitely saw how calculus and the amount of derivatives you had to find really is a filter for who is and is not cut out for the engineering and the in-depth and just the amount and the veracity of the mathematics that we have to deal with on a regular basis. It's you definitely have to get to the point where if you are looking at an equation, you should be able to figure out your first and second derivatives with relative ease if you are going to progress to the level that myself and Mike here have actually gotten. And a lot of people seem to get intimidated by that. And there are people who, on the conspiracy side, who really embrace that fear of the unknown. So their knee-jerk reaction ends up being, oh, well, this math is so hard, it must be fake.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you can't understand it, then it must not be real.
Hey, well, but that's like saying I don't speak Japanese, therefore the Japanese language isn't real and it's just gibberish. Well, it's only gibberish to me because I don't know the individual words. I don't know the syntax or the grammar. And it's the same thing in math. The nouns and verbs are the numbers. The syntax is the plus minus divide symbols and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's the same thing. There's grammar, there's syntax, there's rules of etiquette and grammar that must be followed to arrive at the proper conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would agree.
And I think one of the things that really screws people up who've not gone past anything other than the high school math is all of the alpha characters inside the mathematical equations. The F equals or the G divided by and all that kind of stuff. How would you explain those things to somebody who isn't really educated in math?
It's kind of hard to explain all the various different variables because they're going to actually have the same variable mean different things in different disciplines. So you kind of have to understand where you're going to apply a given set of equations to know where you're going with it. It's all about the basic education, starting from grade school math, the basic arithmetic, and building from there as you go through your the primary schools and college. It's got to be something that comes out of the educational system and provided depending upon which direction someone goes in whatever technical or non-technical path they choose in life. But it's I don't know how you would describe what epsilon means in vibrational analysis of a given system versus what it means to a theoretical physicist. So you have to have an idea of what you're looking at and what you want to deal with to know that. So that's something that is like Jared brought up before. It's one of those things that you can have multiple meanings for a given little letter variable, and it does wind up confusing people. And then there are people that will prey on that confusion.
Well, let's simplify that even further. Let's just take a look at Newton's gravitational equation. All right. All the little alpha characters in there are just placeholders for numbers to be plugged in later, right? And it can be used to predict the fall of objects as well as the orbital paths of planets. So we just kind of have to know what is the mass of the object we're talking about before we plug in the numeric value for M1 or M2, yeah?
Yeah. And it's usually easier to manipulate an equation if you're trying to isolate something, if it's the letter variables or Greek characters, whatever it is we're using. But yeah, they are placeholders. They do have usually a numerical value, either already known or which you're trying to find. And if you, as long as you know what mass 1 and mass 2 is in Newton's gravitational equation, you can, and of course the gravitation constant is just a constant. So if you know that that's a constant, and you know that the others are variables, you need to know what mass of object 1 is and mass of object 2 is. You kind of have to understand a little bit of the basics of why the equation works the way it is in order to understand the logic behind what those letters mean. And I think that's something that is often missed by people, is they don't try to understand why something works the way it does before they go off and try to apply it or figure out what they can do with it.
And Jeff is a grade school educator. Before they start getting into, say, the algebra, when we start getting into all the alphanumeric placeholder stuff, what kind of foundation does a person really need to really get into, say, the first beginning algebra? And what parts, if they missed, is that going to preclude them from really understanding as they move forward?
Well, it's really just a matter of learning the vocabulary of math. That's one of the first things we cover in primary school. They need to understand what the operations are, how they work. They need to understand what the terminology is that we use when we speak about math. If they can get their heads around that, then it's just a matter of learning the formulas and learning the rules applied to algebra or calculus or whatever. They need to learn that math vocabulary, that math way of thinking, and that's what we focus on at the primary level. And of course the basic arithmetics and geometry.
And Jared, haven't heard from you for a moment.
Well, when the conversation is going the way it is, other than reiterating what Mike's already said, it's just that, and actually what both have said is, math, when you get into the variable stuff, it's understanding why the formula is structured in the way that it is and how to actually attack it and utilize it. If you don't you can understand the why and pick up the math from there, but also vice versa. If you understand the foundations of mathematics in general, you can get one of these laws, one of these equations, and then by just understanding the math, you will start to learn what it's actually saying and what it's actually doing by knowing what the variables are actually targeted at, what the language is actually trying to say.
You used an interesting word, law. What's the difference between a mathematical law and a scientific theory? I think that really screws up a lot of people when it comes to mathematics as well.
A law is the what, the theory is the how. So that's where your laws, which are for the most part mathematical foundations, is what is taking place. Though it is the law of universal gravitation. The theory of gravity is how we understand that law to actually present and work, and that's where the manipulation and the interaction with the natural side of it comes into play.
Do you think that might be part of why conspiracy theories get so weird about math when they start hearing things like mathematical law, and they want to conflate scientific theory with common use theory, and then they hear law and it's like, wait a minute, gravitation's not a law, it's just a theory. Do you think that's part of that cognitive dissonance?
Yes, you will run into a lot of them that will try to play the semantics game in that manner. And the reason why is because they either lack the understanding to try to tackle the topic another way, or they intentionally do it because they know that that is the only tactic that they have, which could potentially lead somewhere in their favor.
And a lot of times their own lack of understanding and of how something works, and hope that the people they're talking to, the ones they're trying to pass a certain message off to, also have that lack of understanding, so that they'll just take it on face value without understanding why something is the way it is.
Yeah. Now, I said in the beginning, I think it was in the background about numbers don't lie. is that a completely accurate statement, or can they be made to lie? I know Amy's an accountant, and a disingenuous accountant could actually keep two sets of books to hide money or whatever reason they're doing it. So are the numbers really lying?
Not the numbers themselves, especially in that case. It's the person creating the separate set of books that would be lying.
Yeah.
Although numbers can if not properly used, can give you the wrong answer without it also being a lie. Like the Spanish built a submarine a couple of years ago that they miscalculated weights so that it was about 75,000 tons too heavy, and if they had flooded the dry dock, it would have never floated. All because of bookkeeping and not paying attention to what is the numbers they're dealing with and putting them all together, and it wasn't a lie, but the numbers themselves were not correct. So you can say that in the big picture scheme of things, the numbers themselves don't lie. Whether the answer is correct or incorrect, but the numbers can be made to lie, and that's really the person itself doing the work that's the liar. But the numbers themselves are what they are. Whether they're correct or incorrect, whether they're a lie or not a lie, has to do with the person doing the work.
Yeah, it's kind of like the moron that was in one of my classes 3 or 4 years ago, and the topic of professional ethics came up in the class, and he tried to tell me that 1 + 1 can't equal 3, and he kind of tried to pull a negative ice cream crap on me with, if I have one apple and one apple, yeah, that's 2, but if I cut that one apple in half, now we have 3 apples, and he could not understand what the hell I was talking about on an ethics line of thinking, where what you don't have 3 apples. What you have is 1 + 0.5 + 0.5, but that's still 2 apples.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's like you said at the beginning of the show when you used the example of 4 out of 5 dentists. I mean, statistical maths, really, if you manipulate your sample size, you can get their numbers to say what you want them to say. Wouldn't you agree, Jared?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I completely agree with Mike here. The numbers themselves are not the dishonest agent in the vast majority of these cases. Can they be inaccurate? Yes, because let's go back to a good old axiom that is still true to this day: garbage in, garbage out. If you use a flawed initial data set, your ultimate end results are going to be flawed. It will carry through. And that's where it really is on the individual doing the work and doing the calculations and everything to actually make sure that the information they're putting into it and their utilization of it is proper. And that's where it comes in. You will get dishonest results from analysis if you have a dishonest person doing it. And one thing that comes to mind is actually an older movie that came across my feed earlier today while I was doing stuff, the Pentagon Wars, where it primarily focused around how um, the development of the Bradley APC, the armored personnel carrier, and its development was actually handled. And when you have that dishonest agent wanting to manipulate things, wanting to set things up in such a way to get a particular result, you can't trust the results in that point because it was a disingenuous foundation from the beginning.
In the media themselves, they love statistics, but the problem with all that is you can quote a statistic. It doesn't necessarily tell you why that statistic is the way it is. It's just a series of numbers. They found that 22% of people had this when they did that. Doesn't necessarily tell you anything, but it's all on how you use those numbers and how you present them to people who don't know the background. That is the important part.
Yes, you're talking about context.
Correct. Context is everything. And I heard that 57% of statistics are made up.
Yeah. And
Isn't that the truth?
I see in the background that Amy has been tracking quite a few comments. Amy?
Yes, I do actually. Terry wanted me to have some addressed for you too. He said, I had so many good comments too, so, but Terry had some questions about how he's using math. Is math just numbers? He does car restoration. There are problems and outcomes involved, he asks. And then he said, so if I don't understand math, I should be a flat earther then? And then, and then logic and Fred Knotts, I'm sorry, said, my son asked me a math question earlier. See if you all agree. Say you were figuring up to 40 for the average number used. Do you want to use, say, 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, or say 5 8s? And then I said, the more data points, the better to get the average. Was he wrong?
More data is always better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the whole garbage in, garbage out thing. The larger your data set, typically speaking, the greater the accuracy of your outcome is going to be. So to get the average in that scenario, if you do the 5 by 8, you have a larger data set, you have more data points. The more data points you have, the better your analysis and the better your outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
That's actually one thing a lot of people really didn't like about me from early on, because they thought I was overdoing it on checkpoints during the analysis portion for the engineering bit. But then when they started seeing how you could catch smaller problems before they're a large problem by doing that, they started realizing, okay, you have a point. Having these different checkpoints, while yeah, it may seem it's overkill, but you're getting the results. You are making progress and you are making improvements on the product, and that's what we want.
Mike, you got anything to say about any of those comments?
Oh no, I completely agree with what Jared was saying. I have nothing additional.
Oh, okay. How about you, Jeff?
Well, it's like Jared said, the bigger your data set, the more reference points you have, the more accurate your end result's going to be. And not only that, the more accuracy you have, the easier it's going to be to spot those little mistakes that are going to throw off your result by huge margins if you're not careful. So yeah, a bigger data set for sure.
So I'm kind of wondering at this point, is obviously the conspiracy theorists who try to make this claim that math is not reality, they don't really understand the math and the rules behind the math and the whole language involved. But I think they conflate that with the ethical values of the scientists or the engineers or the mathematicians that are using the math, and they kind of see maybe one or two disingenuous people within their field and then just automatically leap to this conclusion that you can't trust anybody.
Well, in the case that we're of some of the conspiracy theorists that we're talking about here, there's an agenda behind the math isn't reality. The idea is that if you can say that math doesn't represent reality in the real world, and that's what they're trying to say. They're trying to say the real world examples and real world things that we do, theoretical math has no place, so that they can get rid of certain things like saying Einstein's general relativity supplants Newton's gravity, but general relativity is all math based and therefore isn't real. So there's a whole agenda behind some of that stuff too.
Yeah, and it looks like Amy has got something really good from Forever Learning. Amy, what is that?
Yes, sorry, my mute button. Everybody fights with those. Yes, I had some good ones from Forever Learning. He said, remember the start of the ozone hole type? The numbers were a bit unbelievable, and the Dutch Meteorological Institute did their own measurements and found out NASA had misplaced a decimal, exaggerating figures by a factor of 10, and nobody noticed and incorporated this error in all calculations and predictions. And that is very true. And Demonic Davros has a question. Could you ask why it is that Flatards believe writing down data for observations not need to be done so we can check their conclusions?
Well,
And yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's exactly it. They don't want their conclusions actually independently verified and checked for accuracy, because as soon as you start doing that to their claims, you start to see just how either dishonest or mentally inept the person making the claim is, and they can't have that. They got to be the special one with the knowledge that no one else has.
Yeah, and that's the second prong of the agenda that I was talking about too, because a lot of things like relative density is a force. Well, how do you quantify that? Well, you can't, and they know they can't. So that's the second part of this agenda is math isn't reality. So now I don't have to tell you how it works because I have no equations to give you, and we can ignore that fact.
Yeah, that's kind of like that Bob Russ pseudo video that we were watching on the Shills tonight, where the individual started plugging in random numbers to this density tower to try to prove his point that we're going to talk about in the next show with the gravity versus density. But yet he didn't tell us why he was using the numbers he was using. And I got a blister on my finger from going to, trying to figure out why in the hell he was using the numbers he was using. What do you guys think about that?
There was those unicorn farts. Is that what he was? Is that what the values he was using?
Yeah, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, I think I'd want to know the density value of those liquids and be plugging in those numbers, not some random numbers that you're just pulling out your rear.
Well, from a realistic standpoint, there are situations where you can use relative values to describe something without quantifying something in particular, but that's just illustrative purposes. He's in this case, you're actually trying to describe how something works, and you clearly can't do that with some random relative scale.
I like it too.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Amy. What is it you're liking?
Oh, yes. Jen's question. She had a great question. She has said, are maths invented or discovered?
That's a good question. Experts?
I would say a bit of both myself.
Yeah,
I mean,
I tend to think so.
yeah, there's forces and constants that have always existed. It's part of the natural laws of the universe, but we used what we created our own system of quantifying that by inventing maths and then using the maths to describe it all.
Yeah,
That's my take.
and there was a book by Carl Sagan called Contact, and I know we're talking about a fictional realm, but these alien beings presented some signal to us, some data, and it was the basic math. The prime numbers is what they started with. So those things, like certain aspects of math, I think it's pretty much discovered, but you have to have the basic foundation that 3 objects is 3 objects. No matter what word you call 3, it still is 3 objects.
And we had to invent a language to identify that as 3 objects.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where I would definitely agree. It's a bit of both, because you have your foundations, your tenets that were discovered, but at the same time there were those bits that did need to be invented, such as the regular language, which then fed into it, be it the actual numbering system or also the explanation of a sum, to divide, to subtract, to multiply. The actual naming of the functions would be invented, but the actual usages and the way it works, I would say, is where the discovery bit is.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
Newton had to invent calculus, right?
Yeah, he invented a methodology for manipulating equations to show the relationship from uh, velocity to acceleration to position. You know, it was, and they are relatable that way. So it's a methodology of using equations in certain ways. Yeah.
so the invention part is, say, the Arabic numerals that we're using today, the shape of the characters. But the discovery is that, yes, those are three different objects laying on my table. But say, let's go back to Contact. Say there was an advanced alien civilization. Say their sidereal day was 36.3 hours. Their average petals on their flowers, if they had flowers, were say 6 and not 8 that we normally have. Would they still, do you think, understand prime numbers? Did he have that accurate?
Yeah, I think that something like prime numbers as a basis for a, a level of communication is something that should be discovered as a concept, because prime numbers are a concept and a very important concept in mathematics. So I think that you would have to, if you were going to communicate with somebody who has no idea what is going on Earth, that they would have to establish that basic foundation that we all know is universal as far as numbers go. And then how you manipulate the numbers, the math that makes all the other stuff work. That's the stuff that's going to be slightly different in the way you approach things. But you still have to start with the basis of the foundation. The I before E except after whatever. So that's the way that we'd have to be able to approach that.
Jared, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And going to something like the movie Contact, you actually had someone who was well versed in physics actually be the author of the original book. So you get a lot of that nuance of the story that is actually accurate and the way things would end up playing out. And it I always enjoy those types of scenarios better because there's that touch of realism to it that, while many people may see as, oh no, that's just movie stuff, that's not real, it's like, no, there was an actual foundation here. Just like Interstellar has one of the ratings as the most scientifically accurate movie to come out in all of humanity that we've seen so far for a sci-fi movie, because it actually does address things such as time dilation and the effects that you would actually get from your proximity to the immense gravity well of a black hole. There were some parts of it that were inaccurate, like some of the way that some of the tidal forces worked on a couple of the planetoids, but the foundations of the overall premise of the movie and what it was showing, uh, kudos for its accuracy. Um, and what was actually interesting, there is a YouTube channel, CinemaSins, tried to do an analysis of it, and the guy who was doing it was initially, oh no, that's got to be wrong, and then he had Neil deGrasse Tyson help him, and it was like, nope, that's actually right.
Funny how that works.
Agree.
Um, so when I watch, say, AB Science's channel, and he's a physicist, he makes my brain hurt. Do you guys have that same problem?
Oh,
I
I love
used to.
watching his videos.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, you both use models in your profession, mathematical models, Mike, when you build chips, and Jared, when you're dealing with avionics or building a computer board or whatever. You got to mathematically model these things before you start actually putting pieces together, right? How different is that from, say, the theoretical models that he's using?
For what I'm doing with the advanced electronics, actually not very, because a lot the solid state electronics that we have is directly from theoretical physics, and we would not have the semiconductor transistors that are as tiny as they are today if it was not for the strides that have been made from the theoretical side to understand that quantum tunneling is a thing and then learning how to use it for our benefit. There's a reason why technology overall, as we further our knowledge of it, it has a habit of shrinking.
So, and that's an example. We talked about in the background a little bit about how the quantum mechanic theories helped produce solid state electronics. So that's an example of, even though we don't know all the ins and outs of a particular scientific theory, it's still usable in the real world.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because you can even it is the only straw that conspiracy theorists have to latch onto when it comes to gravity is the fact that we don't know every single detail of how the interaction actually takes place, like the actual mechanism of interaction that presents as a gravitational attraction, or in the Newtonian physics, the actual force, the actual acceleration due to gravity. Just because we don't 100% know that mechanism, it doesn't mean that we don't understand it to a level where we can apply it and actually utilize the knowledge that we do have. I mean, there's a reason why there Neptune and Uranus were both predicted where they would be in the orbit mathematically before they were directly observed through optical astronomy. So to say that math is not even reflective of reality in any way, to say that there's no connection between the two, those two discoveries right there just fly in the face of it.
Absolutely. And it looks to me like Amy's chomping at the bits to let us know what's going on outside of our conversation. Amy, what you got?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I've got a few great comments. Purple Rhymes with Orange made a great comment. He said, math was discovered. The symbol sets we use to communicate them are invented. And then we had Peter Harrington say, if you were to burn all religious texts and all religions were taken from the earth tomorrow, they wouldn't come back, but math could be rediscovered.
Yep.
And we have here's a demonic Davros said, here's a poser. Why is the Hubble constant always being changed? And yeah, and Linda Bertelson says, why don't flare understand that the devices they use to make their videos were made with the same math they deny exists?
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to the whole constants changing, and even Hubble's constant, what you have to look at is the difference between changing and refining. Even the gravitational constant has gone through refining, fine tuning. The more you reproduce an experiment, such as the Cavendish, with greater accuracy, the farther in the decimal chain you can actually get that constant to. Did the constant change? No. Did our accuracy of measuring it and deriving it increase in accuracy? Yes. That is refining, not changing. And that's where, again, the conflation and changing of language that conspiracy theorists consistently do is absolutely maddening to anyone with even a sliver of intellect on a subject.
Yeah, it's that refinement that makes the accelerometer in your iPhone possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the science is all about refining. Do we know it all? Absolutely not. But like our friend AB Science says, a lot of science is just refining to the point of being less wrong today than we were yesterday.
But
Um,
one thing that I'd like to ask both of our guests, don't you feel that for the level of maths that you both do requires a very specific aptitude from the individual? Like not everybody is suited to do what you do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Because it even goes back to both Mike and I are ex-Navy. We both had to take the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, and there are so many diverse subjects on there that you can bomb one section, but your aggregate scores still be very high. You can still be rated as a top tier potential for enlistment, but still be lacking in certain areas. Like, I'll be honest, when it came to the coding and code recognition section of it, I was not confident in that bit at all. And my score was relatively low on that one segment, but my overall score was in the top 1 or 2 percentile of everyone who has taken that version of the test. So it really depends on that individual. Not everyone has the aptitude and has that ability to look at a complex field equation and actually be excited to work with it. A lot of people will look at it and be turned off from it because of the complexity of it. It takes a certain type of mind, a certain level and type of curiosity to want to get into these fields.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
exactly. I also liken it to art. Certain people can draw incredibly. I've seen some pencil drawings that, if from a distance, look like photographs. And that sort of talent, that sort of aptitude, is something that not everybody has, not everybody can do. It's the same thing with engineering. It's the same thing with accounting. It's the same thing with a machinist. These are things that just like everything else in the planet, you have to have an aptitude for, and you have to like what you're doing.
Yeah, and logical. Do you, what it's my the feeling I get is that because it's such a high aptitude required to do what people like Mike and AT2 do. Do you think that maybe a lack of that aptitude is what makes conspirators think the way they do?
Probably, but it's also been my experience that just because you don't have the innate aptitude doesn't mean you can't learn it. I don't have an aptitude for languages very much. I can learn a few words here and there and order a beer and a meal and tell a taxi driver where I want to go, if I spend a few months in a foreign country, but I can't have intellectual conversations in that language. I just I lack the aptitude for that language. And with math being a language, I struggle learning math, but I can still learn it. But it's been 15 years since I've used algebra, so I don't remember all the ins and outs of the rules to work an algebraic equation today. But if I dig back into it and start practicing, it would come back. So I don't think the lack of aptitude is a good enough excuse to just write it off.
Well, I think another point is you're going in there to learn something, to almost to discover something. Some people, some conspiracy theorists, will look up and learn things that fit a scripted narrative, that fit they go in with a preconceived notion of what they want the answers to be. and that's not how you can't learn why things work the way they do if you are wanting a specific outcome when you go into to look at it.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, we got another little side briar too. In a lot of their arguments is this concept of what the hell how am I trying to say it? Margin of error. How in your guys' professions, how accurate do you got to be? What kind of margin for error and things still work do you have to work within?
Well, let's take pi, for instance. Now they have like computer programs now that are just calculating as many decimal places as they can. There are millions actually right now. But do you need that many? Most of the calculations I do go out with pi. If pi goes out 5 decimal places, that's probably more decimal places than I can accurately determine for most everything else in that equation that pi is in. So the accuracy of analysis, the accuracy of what you're doing, it is important, and it's important to understand that just because you add a bunch of decimal places doesn't necessarily make any given equation more accurate.
Yeah, and another things for that question is, it really depends on the individual project you're working on, the level of accuracy that you need to go to, and also, are you looking at a purely uh, electrical and electronics analysis, or are you also getting into the metallurgy and physical and mechanical stress analysis as well? You're going to have different tolerances because of just the material that you are working to analyze. And a general rule of thumb that I've been working with is, for my electronic side, I'm doing 3 to 4 decimal places on typical average for accuracy, simply because if you go less than that, you could end up with too much of a variance on your output. But at the same time, going beyond that inaccuracy either poses a limitation from actually being able to capture the data, or you're intellectually flexing muscles that you don't need to, because,
Mhm.
well, just because you can go out to a 7th decimal place doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember my one of my high school math teachers. He once said to us, "There is little or no ambiguity to math." Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. It is it is so I don't want to say accurate. It's so it is a description of reality in such a way that, like, for what I do, we design a submarine completely within a mathematical environment. We never build the thing first. We use 3D CAD. We used to use just Draftsman, but they design it. The engineer looks at it. They analyze it with math. It's designed with math. It's done with math, and then you get a submarine out of it when you're done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's quantitative analysis. You can't do that without the math, without the numbers. And that's where I look at mathematics of all levels as close to pure logic and pure analysis, with minimizing the human element as much as possible. And that's where a lot of conspiracy theorists really latch on to and try to go away from the math, because you in order to accept math and the analysis that can be utilized from it, you really have to accept that our natural senses as biomechanical beings has inherent limitations, and they loathe that idea of them being lacking in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and when they come out with these claims that math is not reality, I think what they're trying to do is invent ambiguity and then use that as a basis for their argument.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I think Amy is poking me, telling me that she's got more comments she wants to throw out.
Yes, please. I've got a couple here. I've got one that says purple rhymes with orange. It's got awesome comments too. In science, sometimes things do change. That's the biggest difference between science and religion. Science can acknowledge we had a bad assumption and make corrections when better evidence is presented. And then we had Inquisitive Quandary said mathematics can unlock and predict all aspects of everything that exists with enough data, of course.
Oh, really good comments, yes. And I have noticed that there is quite a bit in the chat comparing the religion and the science, and we're probably going to have to do a show on that one too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no
we
kidding.
may as well discuss that since they're discussing that in the live chat, just a little bit about the differences between those two concepts.
Well, in some cases, there may not be all that much difference. I know, like the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they have priests who are physicists, who are engineers. They now, look at and embrace the science side of things. For what reasons, I don't know, but they do, and I find that kind of interesting.
Well, they're
I
not
do
as
too,
hard
actually.
line. They're not as hard line as they used to be, because for the longest time it really was a knockout drag out argument and fights between the progress that was being made from scientific discovery. Even going back into the Renaissance era, you were having the burgeoning sciences making discoveries that, from the understanding, flew in the face of what was being taught as doctrine and dogma from the primary religions. And that's where that argument was, is because, well, yeah, your methodology is good, but because your result doesn't match what this holy text says, it must be wrong, because, well, this holy text is direct from God and God wouldn't be wrong. And
Right.
that's where that genesis really came from. And once you start realizing and treating religion for what it is, as a mythology base instead of a factual base, you get less of those arguments.
Yeah, and I've heard flat earthers bring up Copernicus a lot, and they mistake why the man didn't release his thesis until he was on his deathbed. He didn't think he was wrong. He was afraid of getting burnt at the stake. I think I would be a little hesitant to release that sort of thesis myself if that was the possible outcome.
Right.
Absolutely.
And and so yeah, they've come, at least the Catholic Church anyway, has come a long way since that time. But there are still Bible literalists out there today, and I think what was going on then in Galileo and Copernicus's day is kind of still going on today with the Bible literalists. Is they think that we're trying to disprove God and replace God with science when in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but we're not even asking the question whether or not God exists. We're just asking the question, how does the universe work?
Yeah, and we need science to figure that out, not God.
Yeah, I will admit, in all of my pursuits and my curiosities, religion and its factor in it has only come into play when I'm looking at the human side of it, as in that the little doses of psychology that I've done in why does this person think or react this way. And to me, that's where it comes in, which is where a topic that's come up elsewhere is how to treat religion. And because a lot of people want to call it a mental illness, whereas my stance is that religion is a coping mechanism. It really is at its core, when you look at where it came from and how it's been utilized, and then how it has been manipulated from that original usage. but that's getting into the history and the softer side, and why do people think the way they do? Why do people act the way they do when it comes to certain topics? So that's where religion and sciences can interact. They can have a conversation together, but if you are honest about what each one is at its core, there's no problems. But it's when you try to misrepresent one or the other or both of them that you start having the issues, that you start having the arguments. Well, this one says this, well, this one says this. It's like, no, that's where the human element starts to muddy the waters.
I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely. And apparently, Annie Flatter's in the live chat talking about pizza. So we may as well address that in terms of the topic. So, Annie Flatter, you need to calculate pi of your pizza pie and decide, do you have enough there to feed everybody in the live chat and on the panel?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun little thing right now. Mike, Jared, can you help him with a 16-inch American inch pizza and decide, how big of a piece we need to feed 24 people in the in the live chat?
Well, that would be enough for me. I don't know about everyone else.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say the initial answer coming to mind is not enough.
Not enough. No way, man.
Yeah, I know we're not really a point and laugh channel, but every once in a while you need to have a bit of a giggle anyway, especially when you got a
That's-
topic that can be boring to some people. But I guess those some people wouldn't be in this in the live chat for this anyway, now would they?
Absolutely.
Pony up with that pizza, please, anti-flatter.
But you know what, Furball in the chat does have a very valid point and more so question. Pineapple or no?
No,
Ooh.
it's not
No,
allowed.
I s-
I think it's allowed.
Heathens.
Oh,
I'm
come
surrounded by heathens.
Oh.
So anyway. Whoa, we just took a left turn in Albuquerque. Sorry about that, guys.
Looks like pineapple is pretty popular in the chat.
Apparently,
But again,
well,
that is another thing. When you're going down the road of analysis, sometimes you will get distracted and take these turns. I've had a number of team members do that, where they're working through an analysis and end up inadvertently veering off track, and it's like, wait a minute, why did you go over here? Why did you start doing this? Oh, well, I noticed this. It's like, yeah, but this was the circuit you were supposed to be looking at. It's like, oh shit.
yeah, we would
Yeah.
call that chasing butterflies.
Yeah, it definitely does happen. I was doing testing on component testing, and wound up on a side track writing a white paper on a totally different subject. It happens all the time. And one thing that always kind of annoys me, because I like math puzzles and tricks and jokes. There are whole books on them. So a lot of the things that conspiracy theorists present, like this whole divide by zero thing, kind of annoys me, because it just takes the fun out of all of the those math jokes that I like to read.
There's math jokes?
Oh yeah, there are whole books on math jokes, tricks, and puzzles that are much more interesting than any example that any conspiracy person has brought up recently. And then you got Abbott and Costello. 7 times 13 is 28. And
Oh,
that's really,
yes.
at least that's fun.
Yeah, I remember that routine. They were great about it. Somebody in the chat earlier at the beginning of the show was talking about Abbott and Costello. It's funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
Probably my wife.
I think it was.
But
Well,
I do have to say that for some people, their difficulty with math is truly legitimate. I mean, I suffer from dyscalculia, and it can be a real challenge sometimes, even to get through basic maths. But if you apply yourself enough, you can get through it. However, other people I know who have the same condition don't even want to try, and that's where they go astray.
well, and that takes us back to episode 1 with uh, the educational system isn't failing you. You're failing yourself.
Yeah.
And people in the live chat, start throwing some questions at Amy so we can keep moving forward with the conversation. We're kind of in a natural lull here, but I don't know about you guys, but I'm not quite ready to hang up the phone call yet.
Oh no, not yet, man, not yet. We got some more stuff to talk about, I'm sure.
Oh, we do.
Absolutely. For example, AT2, you're in avionics, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you do a lot of electrical stuff and things like that. How important is math when it comes to actually programming the avionics, like the coding?
Well, on the coding side, it depends on the language you're doing in and what system you're working on. Because some of them, like some of the navigational platforms, yeah, you do have math that you actually have to program in for it in a way, because a lot of people think a lot of people get GPS systems wrong in
Hmm.
how it actually works from what part of the system does what, because a each individual satellite will reply to a ping from a receiver with, "This is where I see you at," and it's the job of the receiver to take all of those data points from each satellite that it's actively communicating to realize, to then triangulate, is like, okay, you see me here, you see me here, you see me here, and this is the point where all of those directions cross. So that's where I'm actually at, and that is pure it is a purely mathematical analysis. So you have some systems like that that do that, but then when you get your like your HUD interface, your heads up display, your human interface, you actually end up getting a lot of your regular programming language, like the computer that I'm sitting on right now, where it is actually a text-based language, not a math-based language.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And if we really want to, it's beyond the scope of this discussion, but if you want to get into the math of some of what Jared does, you can really pop some heads by talking about how imaginary numbers are real.
Oh, yes.
Cool. Tell us
Oh,
a
yes,
little bit.
please do. Let's explain some of that.
You want to go ahead and start off on that, Mike, as you brought it up, because we could really have fun with that, because it really does get into kind of the brain teasers, because it does really start touching on that realm of where you're getting into the maths that are typically used in the theoretical side of things. But again, just because it started out on the theoretical side doesn't mean it lacks real world applications. Um, and again, this is where a lot of it that I've personally dealt with comes down to the computing. Your The imaginary numbers end up actually helping us get through some of those hurdles where you start breaking that barrier between the macro and micro realm, and it does help bridge that gap. But I definitely look at those as more of a band-aid type application where, yes, it helps, but is that really what's going on? And that's why I'm on in class right now for more of the theoretical stuff, because I love that question of, how is this actually working? And I want more of that hands-on with bridging that gap and actually understanding more towards that particle physics side of what is actually going on.
Yeah, exactly. What do you got, Mike?
Yeah, my world is not that deeply theoretical like Jared's is. Mine is everything I do is F equals ma. I mean, sometimes that may be a third order linear differential equation, but it's still F equals ma. Mine is my realm is completely mechanical in application. But that's why I referred for this one to Jared, because this is his area, and we can really.
Oh yeah. When you're getting into electricity and electronics, that's again, I call it bridging the gap, and some of the professors I've had have liked that. Some of them haven't, because some people can take that as alluding to the theory of everything that people have been working decades and decades to try to harmonize between the quantum realm, which is your for the mathematics side is the theoretical side of it, and your macro, which is more towards your statics, your statistics, your mechanical and chemical engineering side of things. And and that's the thing with electronics, especially, is it really does sit in that middle, because you have your higher level analysis, which is stuck in and does lean towards the macro. So an initial, okay, I need this circuit to put out this voltage at this point, and this is my input here. You can start a basic design um doing an LCR circuit on the high level stuff before even getting into solid state and the logic gate side of it. But once you start going towards that bit where you're actually going into your NAND gates, your NOR gates, all of your different triggering for the digital realm, that's where you start getting towards that theoretical side, and that's where you do start to see that pesky little eye pop up. And at first, the first time I saw it, I was like, wait a minute, wait, we're dealing with real world applications here. Why are we starting to deal with imaginary numbers? Like, I know they're a thing and we had to keep them in the back of our head, but when we were dealing with calculus and the analysis side of it, we didn't deal with that. But now for the circuit level stuff, it's back. What gives? And that was the explanation, is because you're dealing with the electronic side, especially on the digital side, because you're dealing with the actual flow and the actual usage of the electricity in different ways, putting information onto a signal, decoding information off of it, or whether you're using pure voltages. Because you're going to that area, you are hitting that limit, you are hitting that threshold where you start to have to utilize that quantum level type of work, which is where those imaginary numbers come into the equations. And as long as you recognize that that's why they are there, the math simplifies beautifully again, because
Yeah.
it's an expected value. It's an expected variable to be in there.
And even most of mechanical engineers that I do, we would consider that PFM, which is pure bleeping magic.
Oh,
Yeah.
I loved this one from when I went through a school, when we were getting into the more advanced AC and DC theory in the strand portion, the second portion of it. The instructor just said, okay, now we are teaching you the theory. In real world, you will see variations. Very rarely will the two line up completely, which even I had to remind a few of my engineering professors of that, and they were like, no, it'll always work this way. Yeah, okay. But the military instructors I had always said, okay, we're teaching the theory. Just imagine a nice shiny red button with the words "I believe," because that's what we're doing. We are teaching the theory right now. We are teaching the perfect world application and understanding that with no other factors, with no inherent signal loss that you get from a slightly verging on out of spec circuit board, none of those manufacturing issues, pure analysis, pure design, no loss, perfect power factor. That's what we're dealing with. Just remember, it works, and I believe.
Oh yeah. In nuclear power school, we had to do that a lot. Just push that "I believe" button when we're talking about the nuclear physics that makes a reactor work.
Yeah.
Well,
I was
I
actually
had
going to
that.
ask about that.
I had that when I was learning how to scuba dive. I didn't know how that aqua lung worked, but I believed it was going to keep me alive. Um, Amy has been poking me in the ribs. I think I'm getting a little bruised from it. Apparently, she's got some good stuff in the live chat going on.
Yes, I do actually. Some very good things. Of course, we've got anti-flatter in there. He's being silly, and I love it. It's funny. But we also have some really good things too. Purple rhymes with orange. Had never thought of religion as a coping mechanism, but it does make a lot of sense. That's from a previous conversation. He has dyslexia, so he can do math in his head, but if he has to write it down, he's far more likely to screw it up. And then our lovely Tattie-bogle has a question for us too. Do you think the general standard of math decreasing as we rely more heavily on tech?
I would say no, because no matter
Okay.
how much tech you've got, if you don't have the basics from the classroom from grade 1 on, you're not going to be able to use that technology effectively.
I don't know. I think for the general layman walking around doing their business that are not trained in math or mathematical occupations the way our experts here are on the panel tonight, I think there may be some value to that statement that, we used to have to, do the math in our head or get the checkbook ledger out and actually write the numbers down. Now we got the calculators right on our phones and punch in a few numbers, get the answer. You don't really have to think about it. So, yeah, I kind of think at least the common person that isn't using math every day in their jobs are not as proficient as they were, say, 20, 30, or 40 years ago.
Yeah, I'm coming from it from the standpoint of a grade school teacher. I mean, dealing with little kids aged 9 and 10. We don't let them use calculators because the whole purpose of teaching math at that level or that grade level is not just the numbers, it's teaching them how to think analytically. And they can't do that if the calculator is giving them the answers. So we don't allow them.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. My first supervisor, if you walked into his office with anything more than a pencil and a piece of pad of paper, he would throw you out. He wouldn't even let you use a calculator for the basics. Even this is even as you're already a degreed engineer doing the job, because he wanted you to think about the values you're using and you're getting and why they are what they are, rather than pushing numbers into a calculator and getting an answer.
Yeah.
And given that question, Mike, I'm kind of curious. Is Linda any good at math?
Yeah, pretty good. She's
Good.
a physical therapist. She deals with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
She still comes to me when she wants when she wants something calculated, but yeah, she's good at it.
Okay.
Jared, you've got a young boy in primary school, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you let him use a calculator to do his homework?
No, because it's just that it's that you need to understand why it works and how it works before you
Exactly.
can use you can go to the technology to speed things along. And I think that's where you get a lot of it. Should the technology be utilized in lieu of the understanding? No. Is it? In a lot of cases, that is how it appears to be from a higher level standpoint, where you do have some math departments actually teaching the math alongside with using the calculator instead of working through how to do it by hand, and then at the end of it all being like, okay, now here's how you do here's how you would put it in on this type of calculator to make it easier. That way I preferred the teachers who did it that way, because they would make sure that you understood why and the how, and actually
Yeah.
understand it on your own. That way, what happens if you don't have your calculator? What happens if it craps out on you in the middle of a test? Well,
And
Exactly.
if
not
you
only that, yeah, not only that, but if you don't know the how and the why, how can you be sure the calculator is giving you the right result?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, apparently Linda did answer us or at me in the chat. Amy, what did she say? Amy, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry. That mute button, I'm telling you. Linda Bertelson said, I am okay with math, but not calculus. I can do up algebra well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was only asking that because it's funny to me that when Babes and I goes grocery shopping, she actually asks me to tell her what's the better buy based on the price per ounce or whatever. I don't know why, but she throws that at me, and I don't know if other people have had the same thing with their spouse or not. But
Yeah,
that's what
Linda-
I was thinking of.
Oh
Linda
yeah.
I'll tell
did
you.
the same thing to me.
Yeah,
But
my
what
lady.
Karen was saying is, like, my calculator that I use, which I consider to be the best calculator ever made, but it'll do, matrix operations, 40 by 40 matrices. It'll do symbolic calculus even, but it really is just a tool to use when you know how to apply the tool. So the technology is there to uh, be used when you do understand what you need to do and how things work. So the calculator becomes a tool, the computer becomes a tool. Back in the day,
And
they had the bicycles.
when the answer is wrong, you can spot it right away because you
Yeah,
understand it.
and that's the thing is, I this thing I try to impress upon the young engineers that are coming in. Just because the computer spits out a number doesn't mean that it makes sense. You have to look at it. You have to have an idea of where the answer should be, so that when you're looking at the answer, to know whether or not is what you expect it to be. Sometimes things don't. A young engineer will say, "Well, this answer doesn't make any sense because all I do is change one thing. What's wrong?" Well, okay, what is wrong? What did you do? What did you change? And how did it affect why that number changed the way to the value it is? And they usually find out that they did something wrong in their modeling of a given system.
Yeah,
Those cascade failures, you make it might even just be that slight misstep in that foundation, and then your output looks all wrong. And that's where I go back to, even when I was in high school, a lot of times a complex problem would be put before me, and because of my understanding of mathematics from just a natural ability standpoint, I could look at a complex multivariable problem and start to get numbers literally coming off the page to me that would get me in the right direction. Sometimes I would even be able to just look at a problem and immediately, without even putting pencil to paper, already know what the answer is. But then I'd go do my couple steps and do my arithmetic out, and yep, that was the answer.
Yep.
Yeah, it's your verification.
I think another problem that conspiracy theorists have with this claim that math isn't reality is this total distrust of anything they consider authority. And by that I mean, Mike, you have tools that you use, and you have to trust the guys that made those tools. And just like AB Science, he has to trust the engineers that make his tools, that they knew what they were doing and they understood what he was working on to make him the tool that he's using. I don't understand why it's not okay to trust somebody else's expertise, because let's face it, none of us can be expert in everything.
Right. I think the problem is it's the overall disbelief in how in everything. And if you start to say, well, you can trust this or you can trust that, then it starts to undermine the scripted narrative that they're starting with, that you can't believe what NASA is telling you. You can't believe what the government is telling you. So it gets to be this deep rabbit warren where you're running around trying to figure out, distrust this, distrust that, and oh, you're using that instrument or that device or that micrometer. Well, that was designed by somebody, and you don't know whether it's really telling you what it's telling you. I think it's all about it doesn't fit their scripted narrative, and if they start believing things that could be as real, then maybe other things are real that they don't want to be real.
Yeah, and that's completely ridiculous to me, because I'm thinking, go back far enough in our evolutionary history. Where in the hell would we be if the people that were hunting, say, the mammoth, didn't trust the scout who said the mammoth herd is over that hill? Well, I didn't see him over that hill, so I'm not going to believe you, so we're not going to go out on the hunt. Or if they didn't trust that the gatherer parts were getting the berries and the roots and the nuts, we would not even have survived without that level of trust in one another, working together as a society. Nothing's changed from then to now except the tools that we're using.
Correct. Yeah, and I had a discussion with somebody on a forum about that exact subject. It's well, how do you know this? Well, I have a certain level of education, I have training, I have experience, I know what I do know, and what I can prove. And so then I can use that to extrapolate out, well, that thing there that I can't verify or do for myself makes sense within the context of what I do know and what I can prove. So there's no reason to believe that such a thing isn't what it is. And the distrust some people have, conspiracy theorists have, won't allow them to extrapolate within their own experience and training and education, if they have any.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a scary place to be. Um, you know, the movie Mad Max comes to mind when distrust in everything rises to a certain level.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that movie, A Beautiful Mind. Same thing. He's brilliant, genius, but he saw conspiracy and threats around every corner.
Yep.
Well, that's got to be a scary place to be inside the head of a conspiracy theorist. I don't get it, and I see nothing in this conversation that has shown me that math isn't reality, or at least doesn't describe reality accurately.
And it certainly does. Like, I mean, even if anybody's driving a late model car, that car was designed at least partially, or in some cases wholly, within a virtual environment using nothing but math, analyzed structurally, mechanically, and from an engineering standpoint using nothing but math. That's even before you build the car. And sometimes, in some cases, those cars are even crash tested in that virtual environment with nothing but math. Now, are we going to go off and say, well, we used math, now I can't buy that car? So you're going to ride a horse and buggy for the rest of your life? No, you're not. There's certain levels of trust, certain levels of belief that you have to have just to be able to function in this world.
Yeah. Going out
Yeah.
and buying a car, you don't even think about whether or not you can trust the people who made it.
Right.
You just know that the technology and the expertise is there, and they've created a product that you want to drive.
Yeah, nothing
How
else. I'm going to trust the engineers who built the car more than I'm trusting the salesman trying to sell it to me.
true, but then again, from the other side of it, I mean, where would we be military-wise if all the sailors and all the airmen did not have some level of trust in the work from people like Mike and AT2?
Oh, absolutely. And Amy, what do you got? Anything new from the chat? That
Yes,
darn mute button getting her.
yes. That mute button's going to be the death of me. Yes, I have a good question from Jen Morgan. She says, do you think much of the math distrust professed by Flurpies is actually a fear of math and their personal inability to do it, like an avoidance complex, maybe?
No, I think
I
it's intellectual dishonesty, pure and simple. They know that they can't use math to support things like relative density or personal viewing bubbles of, whatever sunrise and sunset for your local bubble. They know they can't do that, so they have to somehow be able to get away from showing that they can't do that. Deny math, you don't have to show math. I think there's a lot of dishonesty in that.
Yeah, and that brings to mind my next question. If you gentlemen as engineers worked your jobs the way the conspiracy theory work their arguments, what would
Okay.
happen to the end product that you're working on?
There wouldn't be an end product.
Yeah, we wouldn't even
Bingo.
get to that point, and we wouldn't even be employed for much longer than maybe a 30-day probationary period at best.
At
Yeah.
best, yeah.
We just finished the design for the new Columbia class ballistic missile submarine, and it, like I said, it's completely virtual. We couldn't do that if we didn't trust the tools that we have for design and the tools that we have for analysis. We have to know that they work, we have to demonstrate that they work, and we have decades of data to show that that's a true statement. So we showed it works, we know it works, we trust that it works.
And how long did that project take to complete just in the design stage?
Well, actually, it's technically done, still being certain things are being worked on, but overall, from start to finish, probably 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing. So, yeah, nobody in their right mind would devote a decade of their life to a product working with a language and a tool that wasn't going to be real. That'd be insane.
And we've
Uh,
actually tested it too, and we've did analysis on a piping system using new materials that we were using for Virginia class. Then we went off and the boat went to sea, and we put accelerometers and we put strain gauges on the system, and sure enough, all the stresses that we calculated were in the system, we found out really did exist in the system. So that's how accurate the tools are. So what we calculate and what we analyze, we know works because we've tested it, and that kind of testing has gone along the entire, I don't know, 60 years of nuclear power program.
Sure, the
My
same is true in AT2 Productions line of work. I mean, in aviation, things take years to develop. Like, for example, the TCAS system.
yeah, yeah. Now I know Jared is a Trekkie. Mike, are you a Trek fan?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Anti-Flatter says Columbia class. Tell me it's designated NX-02.
No, it's SSBN 826.
So there.
So, yep. Sorry to burst your bubble there, Anti-Flatter, but get over it. Well, guys, we've been going for an hour and 47 minutes. Do we want to take this out to a full 2 hours, or do you want to kind of start wrapping up a little bit? Do you think we've beaten this horse bloody or dead?
Yeah.
Hello?
And I think it's fair to say that we've addressed pretty much the entirety of the points there about not only how they're wrong, but just showing where if they truly wanted to get rid of math-based foundations, just the extent of technology that they would have to immediately turn off and get out of their lives. Although, Mike, I did have a question for you. I did see in the in our chat in the background leading up to this, there was something that came from a particular shall we call him a potato brain, that you apparently got him to admit to something. Now, what was that about? I know it had to do with the whole math and reality thing.
Share, Mike, share.
Particular potato brain.
A one who recently submitted a 33-page failure of a thesis.
Okay, now. I don't know that I got him to particularly admit something, but I did, point out that one of the experiments that he did do, the neutrally buoyant egg experiment, actually disproves and debunks his whole relative density thing, because the egg moved from a higher density to a lower density. And when you throw that same egg off a cliff, it moves from lower density to higher density. So which is it? And is there some other force you're not taking into account when you did that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned that in a recent video. It's the only thing I could think of that we would be discussing here.
Yeah, and you also had an exchange you were telling me about in the background leading up to this show, that you took a couple of screenshots from comment section there, Mike, and posted in the background for me.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a so some guy had accused me of lying when I said that I was trying to show that math was reality. I brought up some basic examples, like I think it was balancing a checkbook, and a machinist who has to set up a given object, a thing that he needs to turn down. And he needs to know diameters and mentions. So, and he accused me of lying, saying that the original poster of the thread we were under was not saying what I thought he was saying. And the fact of the matter is he's just this guy was just well, I think he was a guy. I'm not sure. He could have been a woman, but he really didn't understand the point that was being made by the original poster, that he was saying math doesn't represent reality, therefore we could throw out what it is that we don't like in math. And he was trying to say that that was incorrect. And it was just interesting that he really didn't understand even the point that was being made by another conspiracy theorist, who was Anthony Riley at the time. So it's kind of amazing that they all can't even understand what each other is saying, let alone present a cogent argument for it.
Yeah, amazing how they can't really argue, especially when they're talking to somebody who uses tools like this, i.e., math, for a living. They may be
Yeah.
able to hoodwink a few people that maybe graduate high school, maybe have spent a few semesters in college, but when it comes to trying to argue with a real expert, it just ain't going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Matter of fact, Jared, what would have happened if Riley had published that so-called thesis at your university?
Oh my god.
I knew he was
So,
going to get something out of you.
uh, so I'm not the I'm STEM. I am a STEM guy through and through. I did enough English coursework to fill my prerequisites for the undergrad. That is it. And when I read it, I stopped after the first paragraph and it was like, oh no, this is not gonna end well. This would not be accepted. And then a friend of mine, another content creator here, Thoughts by Jay Brown, actually took that PDF, sent it to a family member of his who has a degree in English, and that person reached the same conclusion I did at the same point. It read the first paragraph and was like, just no, just there is no reason to go any further because there are so many errors just in the opening paragraph that just no, that it's a fail.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a really, really tough read. I tried to get through it, and I still have it, the PDF up on my screen because I'm still trying to, I don't know, maybe figure out what the hell he's talking about. It is a complete and total mess.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I
Yeah,
figured out that I dumped it into Word. There was something like, I don't even know, several hundred spelling errors. Same word spelled differently, spelled wrong, different times, different ways.
And they had the correct spelling right in front of them.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently, his whatever he wrote it with doesn't have spell check, or either that or JM Truth spell checked it for him.
Yeah, I don't know. It to me, it doesn't even qualify as a rough draft. Just an idea. It's about as good as it gets there. But yeah, we're coming up on 2 hours here. So, Amy, one more last go around with the live chat.
Mute button. Sorry.
Yeah,
I have one from Purple Rhymes with Orange. They say, how can anyone say math is not real? If you have three groups of the same item, you can count the items in each group. Then you can put them all together and count them and see that adding is the same.
Yeah.
that's true.
And I agree with that.
Anything else?
Well,
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Well, final thoughts, Jared?
Well, if we want to talk to the metrics of that paper, I actually found Harry Warp actually did put the document into an actual word processor, and we have a sentence and paragraph count that this is just rather telling. In a 12,622 word document, there were 166 paragraphs with 506 sentences that averaged out to 23 words per sentence.
Talk about run-on
Shame.
pen.
Yeah, I would call that verbal diarrhea.
Yeah.
Oh God, Mike, any final thoughts?
Well, math can and does represent reality. Got to use it properly, and you have to understand why it works. And you can then describe just about anything in the world that you can see, you can view, and you can observe.
Well said. What about you, Jeff?
Well, I thought this was a great show. I learned a lot just by listening to these two gentlemen. Yeah, you can't deny math is real. Anybody who tries is just they're barking up the wrong tree here. And I just want to thank both of our guests for coming out and helping us to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for being here with us, guys. And what about our background crew? Teddy, Dick, you guys got anything you want to shout out or final thoughts before we head out?
No, I'm just soaking in this conversation, this stream, man. It's been absolutely belter of a stream to be listening to. Thanks very much for coming on and giving us all your input, and thanks for the chat for all the questions they put in. It's been an absolutely fantastic stream to be part of. Thanks very much, man.
Yep. Is Dick still around, or did he turn in already? He better not have bailed on me. He made me stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning last night on his stream. Okay, well, it sounds like maybe he's not here. I will talk to him later.
I saw it. I saw it on mute. Come on, Dick. What do you got to say?
Come on.
You can do it. There he goes.
Yeah. Any
All
final thoughts,
right.
Dick?
Yeah, I had everything all kind of put away and stuff because I was just listening on speakers and whatnot there. The chat was fantastic. You guys nailed this back and forth. Jared, Mike Bertelson, unbelievably great contributions to a fantastic conversation. The idea that math cannot be reality is as dumb as spit, to be quite honest. How could anybody say that when math has been used to make predictions that have proved true in the real world for how many years now? It's absolutely ridiculous. Jared brought up the point that Neptune and Uranus were mathematically proven to have to be there and then found afterwards. That says it all. Does it not? That's it. You guys have nailed this. This was an unbelievably great show. Thanks for having me as a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Dick. And you know, buddy, if you don't start learning how to express your feelings, really, you're going to give yourself a stroke one of these days. Amy, do you got any final thoughts?
I do a little bit, actually. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming on tonight. And I've really enjoyed it. Yes, math is reality. To me, it seems like it's a measurement of reality, as it's used every day. It's used in everyday functions. So it is. It's kind of like a representative of reality. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you both for coming on. And thank you everyone for coming.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank our guests, experts, for coming on and being with us. Jared put up with us 2 shows in a row. Thank you very much. And thank you for the wonderful audience and all of your input and help driving the conversation forward. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. Our next show will be, October the 6th. Mike Bertelson will be returning along with BlueMarbleScience. Our conspiracy claim that we will be exploring will be the idea that gravity is not real and all you need is density. Should be very interesting at that point. So we thank you very much for being here. We hope to see you on October the 6th. And with that, Tattie, take us home.